Good evening everyone. So this is the 2026 planning session. This is a routine affair. Anyone who attended last year's session? No, at least that's a good thing, right? They have clear prelims and probably writing mains. We do this every year just after prelims results, and I think we waited for a week for people to settle down. How many have given prelims this year? None of you have cleared, I'm assuming, since you're sitting here, right? So good thing and bad thing, right? Good thing because I am someone who believes that it's better to fail at prelims than to fail at mains or at interview. But like someone said that failing at prelims is the most hurtful thing because that's killing your hope in the beginning itself, right? Because then you have to wait for an entire year. That's true for any phase. But when you fail at interview, you get a chance to write prelims in 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month, right? And you have to always understand that UPSC has a problem. It is a peak of delayed gratification. We tend to do things which makes us happy, which gives us a dopamine release, and we keep following up things. But the effort that you put today, when you push yourself to study for 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours, the impact of all these 8 hours, 10 hours will come only in probably June or let's say April 2027. That's having patience for 2 years in an examination process, which is not easy. But this exam was not meant to be easy, right? I'll put a couple of numbers on the board. I think these are important numbers. Note 5. $334, right? And I think another number is 423 and 89. 334 is the number of days between today and prelims 2026, right? That's a very important number because that's what you're here for. You're basically trying to make the best use of these 334 days. 423 is the number of days between prelims and mains 2026, right? And this is a scary number, 89, right? This is the number of days between prelims and mains. Now, I want an honest answer. How many of you think that you were ready to give a good mains if you had clear prelims? So it's usually a smaller number, right? Because most people would probably imagine that it was better that I did not deep down, right? Outside, nobody wants to agree, but deep down you want to say that it was a good thing that I did not clear prelims because I was not ready for mains, right? So the goal in this examination is that you have to be not transitioning from a prelims failed to a mains failed to an interview failed, right? Irrespective of where you fail, if you don't get a rank, your neighbor and your relative will always be happy that you did not get a rank, right? That's the reality, right? They don't know. And another problem with this examination is that everybody is willing to give you advice on how to prepare for this, right? Do you read the newspapers regularly? Are you making notes? Like very generic advices, right? But they mean well, but it's not something that works, right? So now I think when you fail at something, I think it's important to ask certain critical questions. The first question I said was that if I had cleared prelims, would I have been in a position to write mains? Fair enough. I think that's a good question to ask. I think that's something that you should write, right? Other questions that you should ask is that maybe you should ask yourself that if I failed prelims again next year, what is it that I would have done wrong in the next 12 months? It's a very interesting question to ask. Imagine hypothetically you failed again prelims in 2026. What will you have to do to fail? You'll have to do a lot of things to fail also. To not fail, you have to do a lot of things, but to fail also, you have to do a lot of things. I think that's a very interesting question to ask. And I think I got this idea from some social media channel. If you did a time-lapse video of your last 12 months, does it look like you deserve to win? Deserve to clear prelims? Right? The entire 12 months timeline could probably be made into a 5 minutes. You've seen those time-lapse videos, no, where an entire building construction is shown in 2-3 minutes. So if there was a time-lapse video of your life in the last 12 months, and you look at it, and do you think you deserve to have cleared this examination? I think that's another interesting question. Now, I think this is also interesting. If I don't have my smartphone, if I don't have access to Telegram, if I don't have access to YouTube for the next 30 days, will it really impact my preparation? Will it help my preparation? Will it work against me? Right? That's a very interesting question, because I think one of the challenges that most serious aspirants have nowadays is that, you are overloaded with strategies, you are overloaded with ideas. It's not like you don't have content or you don't know what to do. You're basically having more content and you know more things to do. And what this does to our brain is that we have a decision fatigue, right? And we probably are going from one channel to another channel, one topper to another topper, and every topper sounds convincing. Every topper's story seems relatable, right? Every topper's ideas seem exciting. But at the same time, can you do all of these things? Right? I think that is something that we have noticed, that having more things to do, right? Now, if tomorrow your sibling comes, your brother or your cousin or someone comes, what would you advise them based on your last 1-2 years preparation? What not to do, right? I think this session should be more about what not to do rather than what to do, because there are a lot of people telling you what to do. There is countless number of ideas on what to do, right? So, and I'm someone who strongly believes that at this point of time you should do a thorough analysis of your prelims experience and why you failed before you move on to this experience, because there are many things that you remember now where the wound is fresh, right? You clearly know what has not worked, right? So in that sense, I think it is important to ask certain questions. I have made a set of questions and table. Some of these things which I am showing right now, I will find a way to share this with you, right? Okay. So did you cover all topics for the prelim syllabus in time? Now, I think there is planned preparation and what do you call unplanned preparation, right? Uh, just go back, because this is something that you have to make a note of in your particular books or diaries or something. Did I go for a planned preparation across the timeline? Was your study routine consistent and timely? Be honest to yourself. You don't have to lie to yourself. You can lie to your parents, you can lie to your mentors, you can lie to your teachers, but to yourself, you can probably ask this question: was my preparation consistent and a timely basis? Consistent means it was across a certain duration, not sporadic intensity of preparation where you were very well preparing for a few days, then you were not preparing for 2 weeks, then you were again preparing for 1 week. So the consistency of preparation, see, it's not showing up, it is consistent showing up, which is important for this examination, right? Did I focus too much on non-prelims areas like mains or optional when I should have focused on prelims? Now, people who clear prelims sometimes have a tendency to overestimate their ability to clear prelims, right? And unfortunately, prelims is like that examination which, it doesn't discriminate. I think it's the most least discriminating examination in this various stages, because I've seen people in top 100 ranks not clear after securing a rank. So what do you assume? Usually when you see someone who's gotten a top 100 rank, you assume that they are at the top of their game, right? They are excellent at this. But we have seen instances where toppers have not cleared on this, and many a times they underestimate the amount of time that they need for prelims. And this is particularly true for CSAT, right? We all overestimate our ability to do well in CSAT. Maybe we have this bias that I'm good at quant, I'm good at English, I'm from IIT Kharagpur, but we've seen all types of people failing in CSAT, right? We've seen max optional people failing in CSAT. What is the logical expectation that someone has max optional? They should be good at doing this, right? Uh, which subjects were I underprepared, and what was your experience in doing this, solving these exams for those subjects in that area, right? And why did you leave those subjects? I think that's a very important question, right? Was it because there was less questions coming? Was it because you did not have a taste for that particular subject? I think I had this strategy that we had another advantage when we were preparing. We could get away with low scores in GS because CSAT was counted. If you get 180 marks in CSAT, even if you had 50 marks in GS, you clear. We used to have two optionals, and I knew people who chose the second optional after realizing that they clear prelims. Right? So that was a different time. So in this examination, I think it is important to have a very strong preparation for specific areas in specific timelines, right? Current affairs, I think, see, till you give prelims, you don't understand what is prelims. Till you give mains, you don't understand. Even 100 marks don't simulate an actual prelims, because what you experience on that day is completely quantifiable with mock tests or self writing at home and doing these tests. I had a student this year, this was his second prelims, right? He was very well prepared, and this guy was standing outside the school premises and preparing. And in his mind, he's standing outside the school building, inside the school premises. And he got late, and he could not enter the examination despite having prepared. And you can't even imagine the trauma of something like that. I remember speaking to this person at 9:30, 9:45 in the morning, right? Because he could not get into the examination hall. These kind of chaos happens only on the day of examination, right? You fill up answer sheets, and then you fill up your OMR sheet later, and then you realize that I missed one and I screwed up the whole series of things, right? And I think there is also a paradox. A lot of questions which you assume the right answer, you don't choose that, you overthink and you choose the wrong answer. I'm sure you have done your share of these things in the examination, right? How many mocks did I attempt in a timed manner? I think this is an important question in a simulated environment. How many of you could not simulate or have the same kind of experience in the UPSC examination hall compared to sitting in a room like this, which is well lit, which has an AC running, which is, if somebody makes a sound, there's a coordinator who goes and says that keep quiet, students are writing tests. But that doesn't happen in the UPSC examination hall, right? Were my mocks aligned with UPSC question papers? This is another interesting question. You would have written multiple tests, and many tests were designed to complicate rather than to design to test, right? So were my tests which I wrote of how you prepare for prelims come December, January, right? And if you don't write these things down somewhere, the likelihood of you remembering these things later is less. See, you'll always have a feeling that, this is why we tell people to write down the transcript of the interview on the day of the interview, because when you stretch it to one day, every day you delay, you create your own questions, you create your own experience of what you went through, right? Was my what do you call approach towards solving questions more elimination based, logic based, trick based? And when I used each of these techniques, did I get more right or more wrong, right? I wanted to get this out of the way, because the goal is that next year you clear prelims and you get a chance to write mains, right? Did I change my strategy in the last minute? This happens to a lot of people, because they would have followed a particular approach till March, April, and then come May, you have a roommate who's doing well and he has a strategy, and then you shift towards his, right? In this examination, different things have worked for different people. The way your mind works when you look at a question is unique, right? The way you eliminate is based on the kind of information and knowledge that you have, right? You don't always, you can't always copy what someone else is doing in prelims, right? You can maybe get inspired by it. So last minute tweaks with respect to the strategy is a very bad thing that we have seen, right? In the examination hall, what happened, right? Did I have anxiety? When did it start? At what point did it start, right? Because I remember someone who said that I could not carry a watch, and only when the what do you call invigilator told me that only 30 minutes left, then I realized only 30 minutes left. Imagine all possible things that could have gone wrong, right? And some of these things does happen, right? So the examination experience while attending the test, the fatigue that you felt, the anxiety that you felt, right? How mentally exhausted were you after the first test before you went to CSAT? How many of you failed because of CSAT? I'm assuming at least a few would be there, right? Okay, there are a few who have failed because of CSAT also. This year was not as tough as 23, but tougher than 24, right? So this year, I think the English part was. I'm really curious to see the key of UPSC, because last year's key did give us a few bouncers. Now I have met people this year who have gotten 96, 98 who have not cleared. in GS. And my assumption is that this year also, like last year, they have pulled out a few questions. Last year, those was 3 questions. If somebody, 3 questions which they pulled out, and 4 5 questions, the key was different from what all of us were expecting, and against conventional wisdom also, right? Now, if you were someone who counted those 3 questions as correct in yours, and those 3 questions were pulled out, the net impact of that would be more than 10 marks. So something that you were estimating to be 90, so I'm assuming since a lot of people between 95 to 100 have not cleared this year also, the assumption is that maybe 1 or 2 questions or more have been removed by UPSC, right? So we will have to see how that goes out, right? Was I really feeling confident with my preparation, or was I just looking confident in front of others so that I could look good? I think this is something that a lot of us do, that even if you're not doing well, you sometimes fake it, so that you fake it till you make it kind of situation, right? And what were some of the things that I should have done which I did not, right? Maybe should I have done a course? Should I have done more tests? Should I have limited my sources of content, right? You will have a couple of things that you should have done which you have not done. What are some of the things that I overdid or I wasted my time on, which did not give me the desired results? I think there will be a couple of things. Maybe you went behind a particular subject which did not give you as much yield. You went behind a particular source which was useless. You went behind a particular set of classes which did not give you the desired yield. So, if you don't measure these things, you cannot improve, right? I'm someone who strongly believes in measuring things and how that leads to the improvement, right? Things which I did right, but it was too late to do it, right? You felt the impact of something like that, and what was those things that I did, but which I could have done later, right? Now, I'm assuming since you all are sitting here, you all are full-time preparing aspirants. Maybe there's 1 or 2 working candidates or someone, right? But if you were to chart the amount of time that you have spent for preparation and quantify it and look at the output that you have achieved, will you still call yourself as a full-time preparing candidate? This is a very interesting question. This is something that you should try out, because if you are not sitting for X amount of time, or if you are not doing X hours of output, you cannot consider yourself as a full-time preparation student. And that's why you will sometimes see working candidates who are only having 4 hours a day clearing, and you are not clearing. That means the efficiency of your time or the quality of your preparation has not been quite good enough, right? So see, we have to ask these difficult questions to ourselves so that nobody else can come and throw stones at us, right? Because see, I'm assuming since most of you have spent a minimum of 2 years in the preparation right now. This is either the attempt immediately after the foundation or the second attempt after foundation. And I'm someone who strongly believes that you should not give more than 3 exclusive years for this examination, because it's a competitive examination. We don't know how this will play out. You might clear prelims, fail at mains. You might clear mains, fail at interview. You might get a service that you're not happy with throughout your life, XYZ reasons, right? So I am someone who actively advises people that after 3 years of exclusive preparation, 4th year is a good year to pivot. Maybe pivot into additional examinations, pivot into a work, and then preparing parallelly with it. Because we have unfortunately seen candidates who have spent 8 years, 10 years in their preparation, and it's too late to make course correction, right? Because this is the most productive time of your life. This is the time when you learn a craft. This is the time when you earn experience. Your 40s and 30s are built on the bedrock of the work that you do in your 20s, right? So I think maybe this will come as counterintuitive from an institution, but I think being an honest advice, I think it will be better that if 3 years you have exclusively prepared, the 4th year is something when you can probably start with other state examinations. You can start with other examinations like EPFO, RBI, CAPF, other examinations, right? And you don't know what will work. And many times we have seen that candidates who are not securing ranks here, when they got into another service, they had more confidence to appear for UPSC again. So you will always have to consider. And the time is such that if you don't get into a career within a certain gap of your graduation, it is completely redundant. Many of you are from engineering backgrounds, you are from technical backgrounds. The way things are progressing in the society, it's changing so much in so much time, right? Yesterday I was seeing an article of the rate of computer what do you call, programmers for per hour, how it was gone down by 30% because of the rise of AI, right? How and what jobs will be replaced, what things will be existing in the coming years, we don't know. So it will be better that you pivot and you try to build something parallelly, because if you have already invested 2-3 years, I'm assuming your foundation is done, your notes are done, you have done a sufficient amount of practice. It doesn't make sense for you to exclusively prepare for 8 to 10 years for 8 to 10 hours for this examination. Maybe 3 to 4 hours of side preparation is sufficient for this examination, right? Now, other things, right? I'm someone who believes that, during the foundation phase, we have gone for a linear preparation. That means you finished your prelim syllabus, you went for mains, and you went for interview. But when you're sitting here in June 24th, after the prelims examination, I think you should go for a non-linear approach for your preparation. That means you should go for mains, prelims, and interview. This is common approach, right? We are sitting in the month of July. We are sitting in the month of July. June, I think it's over, right? It's another 1 week. It doesn't, let's not count it, right? So you're sitting in the month of July and you have time till May 2026, right? This is the time, and this is usually broadly divided into prelims and mains, right? I think effectively it is around 50 weeks of time between now and prelims, and it depends upon what score you are getting, right? If you are someone who was getting below 80 in your prelims, you know who you are, right? And if you're someone who's getting above 85, 90, you need to have two differential approach, right? If you're someone below 80, you should probably transition to prelims in December itself, right? And not wait for January, because the gap is substantially high. If you're someone who's above 80, 85, maybe you can transition to prelims in January only, because the gap is not that high. Even though 80 to 85 or 85 to 90 looks less, the amount of effort that sometimes you have to do to go from a particular mark to another mark is substantially higher than what you imagine, right? So I will go for an approach where I will probably, let's say if I put this into a chronology, right, timeline, right, we are sitting in July, August, September, October, November, December. This is our phase where we are talking about mains oriented preparation, right? And our Jan, Feb, March, April, May. This is our prelims oriented preparation. This is the broad classification, and I'm assuming this is something that you would have done last year also. Now, see, non-linear preparation is important because you see there is a significant overlap between optional and GS and essay, paper 1 and paper 2, paper 2 and paper 4. It's something that goes in a mixed up manner, right? So if you prepare in this format, I think you will have the advantage of being able to use one over the other, right? And this is something that you should try to achieve in this timeline. Now, if you are looking at this timeline, we are looking at 6 months, right? Now, what are we trying to achieve in this time? We are trying to finish our GS 1, 2, 3, 4. We are trying to finish our essay, and we are trying to finish our optional, right? Now, here also you can go for a independent approach where you just focus on GS for a certain duration of time, then transition to optional, and essay goes on parallelly. That's one approach. The advantage of that is that you'll get a closure on one thing and you can move on to the second thing. Second approach is you parallelly prepare GS and optional. That means depending upon your optional, you allocate 60% of your time for optional and 40% of your time for GS. This is the rough combination of time that you should have with respect to your preparation within the subjects. Within the 60% and 40%, X amount should focus on reading, X amount in note making, and X amount in writing. And I am someone who believes that you have to constantly make notes and write. We'll come to that part, right? So this is also dynamic because it depends upon the optional. Any max optional students out here? One. The thing about max optional is that when it does well, you can get away with less than 400 marks in GS also, right? I have known people who have secured good ranks with 380, 390 in GS because they had 300 or 320 in mathematics. But that comes at a particular cost. That means you will have to put a disproportionate amount of time. Maybe in that case, this will become inverted, right? You'll probably spend, and this is true for subjects like chemistry, subjects like civil engineering, mechanical engineering. You have subjects which are more time intensive because it's more technical in nature or it's more scoring in nature, right? So if you are allocating such kind of subjects, you will have to give disproportionate amount of time for those optionals and limited time for GS, right? Now, an ideal student at this phase should be preparing 3 slots of 3 hours each. This is my expectation, right? It sounds like a lot, but when you break it up, when you're a student who's only preparing, that is the minimum amount of time that we expect you to prepare. And ideally, when you sit for 9, you probably get 7.5, right? At this phase, we are having people who are preparing 12, 14 hours between prelims and mains, right? So, different stages require different approach. Why I am not pushing for a 12, 14 hours? Because it's not sustainable. The chances of you burning out is very high. Do only things which are sustainable in nature, right? So, 60% and 40% of your time. Now, the first approach was where we will focus on a particular amount of time for GS and then we'll transition into optional. So, here my logic is that GS 4 is something that you can do in 3 weeks, right? GS 1, 2 and 3 in 1 month each. That means I think less than 4 months is more than sufficient to thoroughly finish GS if you're going for an exclusive approach, if you're just studying GS. If you're parallelly doing, we have 6 months, 6.5 months, where you will go for 60% of time for GS and 40% of time for optional, right? Now, the things that we will have to do is that, things that you should not do right now is that, don't take your prelims failure to your ego. We have seen this happen to a lot of people, right? This is maybe your first failure in an examination, coming from a particular background or coming from a particular academic pedigree. Maybe this is the first time you're failing at prelims. And sometimes what people do when they fail at prelims is that, they make it their life's mission to clear prelims. And then they'll just graduate from failing at prelims to failing at mains, right? So, don't take it to your ego, because this examination is not just about prelims. Failing in prelims is maybe a good thing, not a bad thing. Now, you might have friends or roommates who are writing mains. I always say this, there's a caste system in Oran where you have prelims failed, mains failed, interview failed, Bhaiya jiska rank aaya hai, and they are repeating it. So there is a particular, I had a friend during our preparation, he said when this roommate came, he used to call Bhaiya with respect. Next year, both of them failed their prelims, then he started calling name. Then the third year, when the other guy cleared mains and he did not, and then he started calling tu, like tum, like so there is a very clear caste system in terms of hierarchical societal stratification, academic stratification happening in the society out here. So what happens is that you have to basically give a certain amount of time for each subject. Now, what do you try to achieve in this time, right? This is another thing that we should understand. See, there are 3 things which we are trying to achieve with respect to our preparation. See, this examination is not about watching a lot of strategy videos. It's not about joining a lot of Telegram channels. It's not about collecting a lot of PDFs and notes, right? You have done your share. I think if you have a digital device, you just search how many PDF documents you have downloaded. You'll be surprised. And how much of that do you know? How much of that is in your answers? How much of that is useful enough to eliminate questions in your prelims examination, right? See, this exam is clearly about learning, which transitions into note making, which transitions into application. What do you mean by application? Application is in the form of 2, solving MCQs, writing answers, right? And then revision, right? This is the overall flow of the examination. This is what you are expected to do. Learn what is the syllabus, make concise notes. Now, many of you don't have the kind of notes which is required at this point of time. Right? I basically classify notes into 3-4 different types. I have something called as a running notes, right, which is what you make while attending sessions. Maybe it's a foundation class, maybe it is some other session that you have. Running notes. What's the nature of running notes? It helps you understand the concept. It is very elaborate and it is bulky, right? Maybe a subject like polity will have 3 or 4 books, right? It is essential because you are not from that particular subject background. You need to build that subject knowledge. So you're trying to understand everything related to that. It has a utility at a particular phase and it has a diminishing utility at another phase, right? So we have running notes, right? Then we have something called as short or thematic notes, right? So short and thematic notes is a shorter version. Now if polity running notes for 3 spirals, this will maybe come down to 1 spiral, right? Because you have basically summarized the most important themes in the examination and made them into thematic notes, right? The third type of notes is the value addition notes, right? This is further, I think the density of the content goes higher when you go down, right? The number of pages goes down when you come down, right? And I think the fourth type of notes, which I call is an embellishment note. Embellishment is decoration. I got this word from a topper. He said, I write the content and then I put all these embellishments. You need to decorate your answers, right, to fetch more marks. The embellishment notes are even more concise than your value addition note, right? So now your goal with respect to each subject in this timeline is that if we are allocating GS1 1 month, our goal is to have notes from the perspective of utility. See, when do you use notes? When you are revising. When do you revise? You revise most closest to the examination. What should be the nature of the notes when you want to revise closest to the examination? It should be concise, it should be crisp, right? When else do you revise? How many of you stand outside the examination hall and revise? You've seen, I don't think you've seen that. There are people who just stand outside and look at the facts. When we used to study, spectrum was only this much. Now spectrum has become this much. So I still remember we had spectrum in the end of each chapter. There were things which you have to remember. So you try to revise at the end of the particular, just before getting into the examination hall. Now, see, this probably you will revise this 2-3 times, right? Because it's bulky, it is long. This is something that you will revise 10 plus times. This is something that you will probably revise 50 times. This also probably 50 times, right? Now, we run a program called AIM, right? What we did in that, we created workbooks which concise content into shorter thematic notes. I'll give you an example, right? I brought this for illustration purpose. We are not selling the course, right? You just understand what we are trying to do, right? So this is basically the workbook. It's an assignment workbook. So what we have done is that we have identified, let's say, 100 themes which the student has to make notes on. Our goal is that these notes will help you revise those themes in the last minute. So what we did was that we gave a target. Tomorrow you have to make notes on these 6 themes, right? So your goal is to finish those themes. Then we also gave these short fact books, right? The idea behind a fact book is that you can bring down all your value addition into one place. This is a GS paper 1 fact book. So all your articles, all your data, all your maps, all your diagrams in one place. How much can you revise something like this? You can revise, you can read before going to the bed, you can read between exams, you can read when you get up in the morning. So your goal should be to develop thematic notes, value addition notes, and an embellishment note. What is an embellishment note, right? If you have just collections of maps for 50 pages, all types of maps, where are the nuclear sites in Iran, right? Where are what is the border situation between India and China? Where are important, let's say, food processing units in India? Where are the various cyclones happening? So there are people who have 20-30 pages of just maps. What will be the advantage that person has with respect to the examination? They'll have more maps in their answers. They'll have more sense of locationally where is what, right? There are people, they'll be able to revise it faster, right? And there are, I've seen people who just have ethics diagrams. There are people who just have timelines. There are people who just have one niche thing, but in a very single place. This is the time when you can fix something like that. Before I forget, now is a good time to start working on your handwriting. Not next year when you qualify prelims. I'm every day seeing people whose answers are so illegible, and I cannot tell them anything because 60 days is not enough to fix that. If your handwriting is crap, now is a good time to start, right? Ideally, you should have listened to your mother when you were in 2nd standard, but you did not do that. Now is a good time, right? So I tell my son that he's in 4th standard now, like, you can't write UPSC mains, like, because that's how bad the handwriting is, right? So you will always have certain things which can be fixed on a prolonged timeline. Now we are sitting in July and we are looking at writing mains in August, which is effectively 14 months of time. And if you just observe how you write your A, E, I, O, U's or your S, your R, across this duration, your handwriting is going to get more legible. Why you should not do this in a short duration of time is that the first victim of an improved handwriting will be speed. Because you'll focus on more on how you're writing and not what you're writing. So whatever advantage that you had with a cleaner handwriting, you will lose with a slower writing. I had a student who used to write crap and he had great handwriting. And I always used to tell him that, if you had a bad handwriting, maybe you'll get more marks. Because at least the evaluator can't read that you're writing crap, right? Sometimes bad handwriting has its advantage also, right? So you basically have to focus on note making. This is a phase. We'll discuss about whether how you can do it on your own, how you can do it with programs. We'll discuss about all these things, right? Because this is a strategy session. This is basically sharing our perspectives and ideas. And the thing about a strategy session is that, you will have different life situations and different experiences. What one person gets from this will be different from what another person. This is just to open your mind to think in a particular direction and not to force you to do something that we want to do, right? You already are doing certain things and you will be inspired to do something else, right? Now, note making is a perfect opportunity to update the relevance of the content that you have, right? Some of you have done your foundation this year, last year, maybe you have had your foundation in 2021, 22. The longer the gap between your foundation and your first mains, the higher the chances of redundant content coming in your answers, right? And this is why you will find a lot of seniors who have been preparing for a certain number of years and they are not able to clear despite being very knowledgeable. I'm sure you will find your friends and roommates and seniors who are extremely knowledgeable, but in this examination there's a paradox, right? Freshers tend to write what is asked and senior veterans tend to write what they know. There's a significant difference between that, right? Because not the whole answer. I'm not saying the whole answer, right? When you're a fresher, your chances of interpreting the demand of the question and addressing the demand of the question sooner is higher because you don't know a lot of things, right? You don't know, right? It's not your problem, right? But when you're a senior aspirant who has been preparing for a certain number of years, you know a lot of things, right? You know everything in and around that thing, and you will write things which has not been asked. One thing that you have to understand about UPSC mains questions is that the questions are always thematic, but it is in the context of a particular narrow area, right? If there is a question on women empowerment, it is in the context of women empowerment and let's say gig economy, right? If there is a question on reservation of women, it is reservation of women in panchayat level. So it's always in a narrow area. Now, if you don't focus on that niche area on which it is being asked, you will always tend to write more on the theme and not on the context. And it's very difficult to differentiate those two things because you'll always feel that you did a lot of justice to the question. You always overestimate your ability to score and underestimate your ability to do shit across the paper, right? Sorry, the word, right? So, no, because we have seen this, right? We have, we are fortunate enough to see a certain number of copies and scale at which we operate. We see a lot of copies. Now, unless you are writing a certain number of good answers, even your good answers will be surrounded by crappy answers. And that's the difference. See, I usually put people's marks in mains in different ranges. Less than 350, 350 to 375, 375 to 400, 400 to 425, 425 to 450. The person who's getting 425 to 450 has 70-80% high quality answers. And the person who's in that 375 to 400 is having 8 to 10 high quality answers. And the perception of both will be that I did a good paper. Because when you do something, you always remember the good things that you have done and you do not judge an entire experience based on every answer. You'll probably remember that, okay, these few answers I had written well, so the paper has gone well. And that's something that we see. We always notice that the people who score well are the ones who give more emphasis on the core demand and write peripheral content after the core demand is addressed. They have higher quality answers in the initial first 10 questions. They have higher quality arguments in the initial pages. So we see a lot of patterns, and your goal is to achieve this by one, updating your content, updating the relevance of your content, going back to your standard sources, right? The short notes are thematic in nature, right? It will not be based on the entire Lakshmikant, but it will be based on specific issues. Let's say the case of what you call governor. Specific issue, not on a specific case, but on a theme, right? You're looking at a particular theme. You're looking at maybe urbanization and old age, right? You are looking at cyber security and international relations. You're looking at a very niche area, right? And uh, you have to always judge the purpose and utility of each of these things. When you think about a note, when you look at your notes, you should always think from the utility of those notes. When will I use this? How effective is this for me to revise in the last 1 week before mains, last 1 week before prelims? So make those notes. I know some of you may have made those notes, right? Because I don't want to hear from you in June that, sir, can I refer this topper's notes? Every topper's notes is being created from the perspective of that particular topper. It's most likely written in a language and in a script that they understand better, right? Because they would have squeezed things, they would have written things in a particular context, and it can be a last resort, but your self handwritten notes should be something that you should work on, right? So note making is something that we'll prioritize in this phase. Now, the second thing that we will prioritize in this phase is answer writing, right? I am basically talking about now to December 2025, right? In this phase, answer writing will be basically based on PYQs, which where you are starting, and this is what we will prioritize on, right? Why PYQs? PYQs is a UPSC compass. It gives you a sense of what UPSC tends to ask. It's a great source for brainstorming themes. It's a great source for updating your notes. You need to know where you need to update the notes. Then you need to look at what are the questions that's repeating. What are the areas where I need more fodder and more, let's say, arsenal to attack, right? So when you are, let's say, allocating 1 month for GS2, one of the things that you must do is to look at the last 3-4 years of PYQs. You must brainstorm on those PYQs. You must think of what kind of introduction, conclusion, value addition, what kind of codes, what kind of data has to come for those particular PYQs. Because UPSC rarely deviates from the theme, but they always deviate the context in which that theme is being asked, right? You'll notice that there are certain themes which keep repeating. I think there was an institution which recently did an advertisement that, UPSC's rule book, which I think was a bad idea, right? Because you don't shout out that, you know how UPSC asks questions, right? So, right, it is a good source for grading your themes, right? You would work on a certain number of themes, and you need to work on which themes are more important, which themes are relatively less important. How much time do I allocate for a particular subject? How much time do I allocate for a particular what do you call GS paper, right? All these things will be clearly influenced by your PYQs. PYQs are a very good source to understand what is not a UPSC quality question, right? In the coming 12 months, you will write a lot of answers from a lot of sources. Maybe these are from test series, these are from daily initiatives, these are from wherever you're getting, right? So it's always important to quote, to practice with the right quality of answers. There's this Japanese quote: if you're going on a wrong train, it's very important to get out at the station that's the nearest, right? Because the wrong direction is more, it's a worse problem than the pace in which you're going, right? So always make sure that the questions that you're choosing are inspired by PYQs, is aligned with the language of the PYQs, is aligned with the kind of themes that UPSC PYQs are focusing on. You must, in the next 6 months, solve at least the last 3 to 5 years of questions. If not solved, you should brainstorm, you should anticipate. One exercise I can give, because since if you're starting on July 1st, you will have at least 60 days before or 55 days before the UPSC mains examination. If you're focusing on, let's say, paper 3 and paper 4 and paper 2, you should create a prediction list, right? Basically, you should create a list of questions or themes that you are anticipating from those particular subjects. Imagine if you hit a few questions, the kind of confidence that gives you will be immense, because you basically understand that, okay, I know how UPSC thinks, I know what kind of areas does UPSC focus on, right? So always make sure that you are identifying a certain set of questions and themes which are likely to come, right? Another important thing which we use in terms of answer writing is toppers copies, right? You have seen a lot of toppers copies. It's addictive. You keep looking at it, you keep scrolling. Some gives you confidence, some scares you, right? Some you imagine, how is it possible to do this in 3 hours, right? And some you imagine, isko kaise rank mil gaya. right? Yeah, we all go through these emotions when you look at these things, right? I had a student this year who clearly said that, my copies uploaded in X institute is from 2022, and if people see that, they'll think that I cleared by luck, right? Because it was written 2 years ago, and it's not even something that's indicative of what he would have done now. I've said this so many times, but since some of you might not have heard this, I'll repeat this once more. There are three things which you look at when you look at a topper's copy. One, is it written in the year of the examination? This is very important because the kind of progress someone who makes, there are people who are writing mains now, right? The way they are writing in June 20th is not how they will be writing on August 20th. There will be substantial improvement that you'll see. So it has to be closest to the examination. Always pick up copies which are simulator based, right? Always pick up copies not based on ranks but based on marks, right? I had a student who was in the top 10 rank but never crossed 100 in essay, right? I know people who have below 400 or below 380 averages in GS despite being in a top 100 rank. So rank is not an indicator of a good copy. The marks that they have secured in that particular subject is an indicator, right? Another trick that I can always tell you is that when you look at a topper's copy and if the year of the examination is not mentioned, it is not from that year, right? Because that's an intentional effort to hide the year, and that is not indicative of what has been written. So always pick up copies which is closest to the examination. Year is there. I'll share a document. I'm showing some of these documents. I'll find a way to share these documents to you at the end of the session. Now this was a document that was compiled by a few toppers of this year and me, right? This is, sorry, I'm assuming it's on the board. Can you see? This is an analysis of marks. I've been doing this for the last 4 years. I have, I think, from 2020 to 23, I do this every year, right? Why is this important? Because it's important to quantify what we are trying to achieve, right? In prelims, the quantification is very simple. You need to get half a mark above the cutoff, right? But in mains, it's a different scenario. You need to know what is the range of score in subjects. Very interesting, what do you call averages? I think the average of essay in the top 100 ranks was below 110. It was around 109 something. The average of paper 2 score of Pol Science optional students was 110. Interesting, no? Because it's basically that you have a very strong advantage with respect to paper 2 if you are a Pol Science student, and I'm assuming 20% of the class will always be Pol Science students. That's a number that we have always noticed, right? So you need to understand where you can leverage, and this will also be a very good parameter to decide whether I can study my optional along with my GS, right? If you are a Pol Science student, IGP can be done along with polity. If you're a sociology student, you can integrate society and social justice along with sociology. So you always find those integrations. Very closely watch the optional section, right? It's scary because some of the students are in optionals which do not do great in terms of marks. There are certain optionals, despite of maximum effort, it does not go beyond 270 or 260. Like if I take an example, maybe management, commerce and accountancy, I think public administration usually hovers around 270, 280. So there are certain optionals which do not go beyond the threshold. What is the lesson from that? I need to make up those scores in GS. That is a lesson, because it is not about how much you make in a particular paper. It is about crossing that threshold of total, right? What is the threshold of total? You're basically looking at scoring above 800 in the written, and that's not an easy task, but it's important to clearly define the goals. It's important to target how much is my target in paper 1. If I need to get 110 in paper 1, can I do it without studying geography? Absolutely no. Right? So if you're someone who has been delaying that, if you have been, can I do it without studying world history? Probably yes, right? Because the weightage of the particular subject when you look at the PYQs is very less. The purpose of this session is to make your preparation as objective and data based as possible. Ask those questions, ask those difficult questions. If you look back at the session, that maybe you should probably able to say that I started looking at the examination differently. I wanted more target based approach, right? So I will share this document. This is already available in the public domain, right? Now, toppers copies are excellent to emulate and compare. In case if you are planning for a strategy that does not involve joining any test series or any institution, toppers copies can be your test series, right? You collect a certain number of toppers copies, you organize it on the basis of subject, and your goal is to solve the same questions that the topper has solved and compare your answers. The solution will be the topper's answer, right? You can build an entire test series with toppers copies, right? You don't, evaluation is a different problem, but with respect to comparing your performance with respect to what others are doing, this is a very strong indicator. That is why we sometimes advise people who are failing at prelims this year to prepare for mains with people who are preparing for mains this year. That means instead of focusing on essay, GS optional and the compulsory papers, you just focus on GS in the next 90 days. The advantage that you will have is that you will have answers that you have written vis-a-vis what toppers have written for the same question. That's a very strong tool when you're writing mains next year. There is no better place to collect introductions, conclusions, data, facts, diagrams than a topper's copy. Because these guys have experimented, tried, failed, tried again and succeeded in doing a lot of these things. Many a times what we have seen is that people who are in their early stages of preparation write arguments in a way which is counterproductive. That means their arguments are smaller than their examples. There is a one-line argument and a three-line example. And you'll notice that in a topper's answer, it is half a page, half a line. I think I should show some answers. This will give you an indicator of what I'm saying. I'm taking Madhav because he is one of the persons who has scored one of the highest marks this year. I think he has 462, right? What is the average size of the arguments? What is the number of arguments in the first page? What is the size of the introduction? Now you will see arguments which are being substantiated, and you will notice that the argument and the example is finishing in 2 lines. Now many of you write argument in 2 lines, then the example in 2 lines, and by the time you have written 2 arguments, they have written 4. And then you ask me why am I at 360 and they are at 440? Because they got 1 more mark in each question. That's what it eventually comes down to, right? Differentiated data, differentiated content, niche introductions, niche conclusions. The exam, I think me and Dipin sir did an analysis recently. We were looking at copies over the years, right? And we observed a very interesting trend. I think before 2020, there was not even a single fact in a GS paper 3 answer. Not even a single. If you want, you can do this exercise. Go back to papers of toppers before 2020, right? There was not a single fact. Now that number is 8 to 10 facts for a 10 marker and 12 to 15 facts for a 15 marker. So in an average topper's answer sheet, you will find 200 plus data points. You think this is going to happen overnight? Absolutely no, right? You're going to need your short notes and you are going to need your value addition notes and you need to prepare in advance, right? At least you should promise yourself that, next attempt if I fail, I should know that I failed because I did not put an effort and not because I was just preparing as a part-time activity, right? So what I'm trying to say is that toppers copies are an excellent understanding for space management, right? How much space are they allocating for each path? How much space are they allocating for an argument? How much space are they putting for a diagram? How much for a value addition conclusion? You need to design your space. I always say that your answer sheet is your real estate, the land that you have purchased. Now you have to build a building out there with the right measurements and the right ingredients for the maximum utility. Evaluation is a very subjective thing, unlike scanning OMR sheets, right? Scanning OMR sheets is not emotional. It's right, wrong, you missed a question. That's it. And in the end, based on a key, the marks come in. Evaluation is something that has a bias because of the previous paper that was checked. Evaluation is something that has a bias because of the knowledge or the lack of it that the evaluator has with respect to the topic that's being checked. Evaluation is a subjective if the evaluator is hungry, right? Evaluation is subjective if they are in a bad mood because you are basically reading the same content. Do you think out of the 12,000-14,000 people who write mains, the top 4,000-5,000 people will be writing very similar content? Because they'll be writing similar test series, they'll be attending similar classes, they'll be referring the standard sources. Do you think the content would be differentiated? And that is where I think this was told to me by a rank 1. He said that to go from the top 5,000 to top 500, that is a game. That's the challenge that you are looking at. You need to be in the top 500 in everything, in optional, in GS, in essay, and maybe in the top 100 in at least one thing. You should I always say this, that you should be a superstar in one area and you should be above average in other area. You have seen the marks. You'll always notice that somebody got 145 in essay and that's why they are on rank in the top 5 ranks. Somebody got let's say 300 plus in the optional, that's why they are in the top 10. So you need to be excelling in one place. Understand your core strength. If you are in a particular optional which has historically never done about 275, the chances of you doing is less. Data at a larger number works, right? It doesn't lie, right? So you will have to compensate that somewhere else, right? Now, toppers copies are also very good way to what do you call, enhance your notes. That means when you are looking at a particular theme, you will see arguments and you will see examples which are different from what you already have, right? So look at those kind of things, right? Intro, conclusion we discussed. Uh, Also learn from the bad answers of toppers, right? You have to understand that nobody is writing perfect answers and for all questions, right? What is the highest marks in GS this year? I think there is someone who's got 474, but 464, 470 is the highest mark, and this is true for last year also and last to last year also. I think in the last 4 years only once it has crossed 500, right? So when you're getting only 45, 47 percentage marks, do you think people are writing perfect answers for 20 questions? It's impossible, because if they were writing high quality answers for all 20 questions, they would have at least touched 600 or 550, right? That would have been the ideal case scenario. That means toppers are getting away with a few calculated guesses, a few fillers, right? And I think you will learn more from the bad answers than the good answers, right? You'll realize that there was a map of India which was in the middle of the page which had no utility in that particular question, but it filled up half a page. You'll realize that the font size in those questions are double than the other ones. The spacing between the lines are higher. The content is being expressed in a schematic format where there is a sun in the middle and 4 points filling up the page. You'll need these answers because you cannot write all 20 answers with high density and high intensity in 3 hours, right? So, and also because you will not know all questions with good content. You will always have some questions which you have more content, some questions which you have less content. So you will always have to do something like that, right? Huh. See, I'll tell you, see, if we are looking at this marks and we look at our marks, how we mark, right? In a 10 marker, we don't give more than 5 marks, right? We try to benchmark our marking vis-a-vis UPSC marking. The last thing I want is that we gave you 125 and you got 19 UPSCs, right? You're gonna come back to me and say that you cheated me, you gave me false sense of hope, right? When we give less marks and you get more, you will always say that income marking strict. I am ready to get away with that, right? Because we have see, this especially happens with people who have just joined a foundation or writing their first test, and then they write a really good answer and then they get 4 marks, and for us that is a very good mark, right? Because it's relative, it's not an absolute mark, right? And you look at paper 3, it's rarely crossing 110. I think it has not crossed 110. I have my own theory on why people don't score in paper 3, right? See, I'll share my theory, right? See, I am not still sure whether a paper is being checked by one person or a paper is being checked by multiple persons. Logistically, I feel that paper being checked by multiple person would be difficult because you have to split a paper between 3 people. That's 13,000, 14,000 units of papers being split with multiple people. But this is India, we have the manpower, we can do anything, right? There was a company in US which was AI driven, but it was software engineer sitting in India and doing the work, right? We can do anything, right? So if a paper is being checked by multiple people, it's possible and it's subject wise logical that paper 3 has the highest composition of diversity, right? Compared to paper 1, 2 and 4, right? Paper 3 has the highest demand for data. Paper 3 has the highest chances of bouncers. Compared to 1, 2 and 4, I think the highest chances of bouncers are in paper 3. And I think these are enough reasons to bring down 10 marks lesser, right? Because in paper 3, I think there is one core economic question which is usually difficult to attempt. One science and tech question is difficult. So 1 or 2 questions are always a bouncers. And that ratio in other papers is 1. In most other papers, DS 1 to 4, the most difficult questions are significantly lesser, the bouncers are lesser, right? and it's very difficult to write. And one more thing that has happened over the years is that I call it the Ian Jain model, right? You need 15 plus points for a 10 marker and 30 points for a 15 marker, and that's what is working, right? Believe me, you look at all the people who have scored above a particular threshold in paper 3, you will see intensity of arguments and the number of arguments have substantially increased. And that's a skill which is not easy to emulate and acquire. So the relative, and I think if a paper is being checked by 4 people, you have 4 people who have extreme skill on 5 questions. Expectation goes up, right? It is something that people feel very easy to judge, right? So maybe because of a combination of these reasons, or maybe there is a guideline that don't give more marks in paper 3. We don't know, right? Something is happening, and paper 3. There was a year, I think it was 2018, when paper 4 was marked like paper 3, and paper 3 used to get marks like paper 4. So I think there was a year, I think this was in 2017, when the rank 1 had only 106 or 107 in ethics, but they had 140 in paper 3. So look at the larger trend. I don't think it's possible to follow that completely, right? Now, I'll also advise that don't go and look at rank 1s and rank 9s and rank 5s copies initially. You lose hope, right? Because I'm seeing, I had a student last year, Kush Motwani, rank 11, right? He's a unique case study in the way he writes, because the amount of content that he dumps. He's someone whom I show when people who have bad handwriting don't have hope, right? Because he had a relatively illegible handwriting compared to the larger crowd, right? And he was able to score substantially higher because of the density of the content that you wrote. Now, when you have failed prelims, when you look at a top ranker's copy, you will probably feel that I'm definitely going to fail in mains also, right? Because it's not going to give you confidence. So don't start with trying to bat like Sachin Tendulkar, right? Maybe you find someone who is relatively, not that complicated and difficult to emulate, right? Now, other than answer writing and note making, another very important thing is current affairs, right? This is another doubt that you'll have. Last year you would have done this. This year also you'll have to do current affairs. Current affairs is something that you can do in different ways. You'll get a newspaper. What is the price of a newspaper now? 10, 12 rupees, 7 rupees. Hindu is higher. I think it's 12. Indian Express is 7 and Hindu is 12. Subscribe to a newspaper. Open it, identify the news, underline, extract that content into the newspaper notes, read it on a regular basis, right? This is one option. Probably it will cost you relatively less, but it's something that's very gratifying. You feel like you've done a lot of things when you read newspaper. The day you read newspaper for 3 hours, you feel so empowered and knowledgeable and better than everyone else, right? Second approach, magazine-based approach, right? You have a set of resources who are sitting and compiling all the important news into a 100, 200 page document, which will help you complete the entire month's content from that particular document. Advantage is that it's more selective. It does not go behind the same topic again and again. They have a sense of what is important for the UPSC examination, and they tell you what to read, right? It's relatively more expensive, or maybe on similar lines with the newspaper based reading. Third approach, you follow some YouTube channel, you follow some Telegram channel, you get the content. All these 3 things are relatively cheaper, but I think there are certain advantages and disadvantages with this, right? Now, when you go for a self-based approach, decluttering is a very challenging thing. Now, yesterday, the last 1 week, there has been this attack on Iran and Israel. In the next 2 weeks, you'll probably see 50 editorials or articles. You don't want to be a subject expert on that. And you'll always have a tendency to follow certain authors, and you'll keep reading again and again. You are not trying to, acquire a lot of content. You are trying to apply that content in the right places. And the way you apply current affairs and prelims is different from the way you apply current affairs and mains, right? And a serious reading of newspaper is probably 2 hours a day. What is your average time? 1 hour 30 minutes, 2 hours, somewhere there, right? So it's intensive, and it's very difficult to maintain consistency when you're doing yourself. There will be days maybe the paper came late, or you woke up late, or you did something. So it's very difficult to maintain consistency when you are doing self-based thing, right? And the problem with this is also that you read everything, but you don't remember anything, right? it is not application based, it is not designed from an exam perspective, right? Now, you are basically looking for a headline based preparation, and ideally you should be going for a thematic based preparation. You should be, because UPSC is not going to ask on 22nd June this article came and from this article we are going to ask you this question. They're going to both possibly ask India's stand with respect to West Asian foreign policy. They're not going to specifically pick up something, right? How has it changed? How are we balancing Israel and Palestine? How are we balancing China and USA? It's broader questions which is based on themes and not on the day's news, right? And it is what do you call important to test yourself with current affairs. You need to, rather than make notes, I think you need to write answers rather than what do you call make read from a particular source. You need to solve MCQs based on current affairs, right? So I am someone who believes that it is better. Again, you can take it in different ways, right? I am someone who believes that there are certain things you should delegate, and there are certain things that you should do on your own. I tell this to people who write mains, and you are sitting here in this classroom because you have come to RN from your home 500 kilometers away, 1000 kilometers away, just for one primary purpose: prepare for UPSC examination. And why are you in this particular area? Because you are having access to the bookshops, to the institutions. And if you're preparing current affairs, you should delegate it to someone or a program. This is something that I strongly believe, right? The advantage of this is that, it is something that has been, pattern based, right? It's something which is utility based. You're basically trying to apply what you learned from the current affairs into answers. You're basically trying to use current affairs that you learn from the content to eliminate options in a particular question, right? And I think there is always a tendency for people to advise things which are not working, and advice should always be from an authorized source which there is accountability, right? Because if you're just consuming from something which is all over, it's very likely that you are picking up things which may have failed for someone and they corrected it, and they did not. Most of the time people don't advise good things, they only hold the best advices for their friends and relatives, right? I think there is a paradox in that, right? Most of the time, I have seen people who say that, I advise a lot of people to join this course because I want to eliminate competition, right? It's a very good advice, right? It's a very good strategy because you basically want people to waste their time doing something. So with respect to current affairs, I am someone who personally believes that you should pick up some strategic expert on that, right? That's a teacher, that's a program, that's a classroom, whatever, right? That's your choice, right? And identify the best things which is available, because you want someone who can, in 2 or 3 sessions in a week, tell you what exactly to follow, apply those questions in notes, apply those questions in tests, apply those questions in for revision purpose, so that it eventually reflects in your answers. You saw Madhav's answers, right? In each of those answers, there was something that differentiated in his introduction. I don't think the evaluator will lift his pen to give you more marks unless he sees something that others are not writing, unless he sees something that's niche and unique. And that's something that won't happen overnight. It's something that you build over a period of time. Current affairs is a habit. It's not a sporadic movement which happens one day and the next day you don't do it, right? So for current affairs and that is why people do answer writing in 3 different forms. You have a PYQ based approach, you have a toppers copy based approach, then you go for a test series, because there you have an accountability at the end of the week, right? See, this might sound like marketing, but you take what you want to take, right? You need something that holds you accountable. You need a peer group, you need a pressure point. I think someone very nicely said this quote, pressure is a privilege, right? Pressure at the right intensity makes you do things, at a higher intensity breaks you. Not everybody can take pressure. If you have come to this examination, it's a very high pressure, high intensity examination. And even when you get into a job after clearing this examination, it's a high pressure job. So develop an ability to handle pressure, right? Because I constantly see people who come and say that, sir, too much pressure, I can't handle. Many of you are sitting here because you could not handle the pressure in the examination hall when prelims happened. I'm sure when you came out and you looked at the questions, you were like, how can I make this question wrong? Because you were under pressure. So pressure, develop that ability to handle pressure, and that is a privilege that you have, right? Now, if you don't delegate something, you have a very high tendency of over-analyzing and coming up with over-depth for a particular specific area. Now look at Iran-Israel issue. most likely they'll not ask a question in the next 2 years because you all are expecting to be asked. Right? This will turn up in 2027. Maybe this recording will be there, you can hear this. I sometimes get this right? It will come up in 2027 when everyone has forgotten. We had been betting on a vaccination question for so many years during that COVID time, and that took them some time to ask, right? They always have a tendency to pick up neglected questions or things which were very high um, intensity in previous years, and that's why we tell people that you should look at our last year's test series questions, because there is a pretty high chance that some of those themes which we opted for last year will repeat this year. So UPSC has a tendency to do that. So identify patterns which are useful for this, right? Um, now, self-study or programs. This is another thing that you'll have as a doubt, right? Self-study works for people who are disciplined, people who are able to meet targets on your own, people who do not need to be pushed, people who do not need a peer group. Self-study works perfectly, right? And unfortunately, most of us are not those people. In our own lives, we don't come into that kind of a category, right? So programs are something that gives a structure to your preparation, right? I'm going to share one thing, right? You can see this again. This is the schedule of the AIM program, right? This is what we do across the duration. We start with prelims mains overlapping topics, we go to mains exclusive topics, we go to prelims intensive topics. So effectively we'll start for prelims from October, then we shift to prelims from December, then 2 phases of prelims testing, then again mains, right? So the idea is that programs gives you a structure, it gives you a target, it gives, in AIM we have a daily target, right? I think we started the program, some of you have come for counseling, you're familiar with the program. We started the program on 16th of June. In the last 1 week, we have people who have written 75 to 90 pages of notes, wrote a test, and still there are some people who are still researching what to do. And eventually you will go do something, right? The irony is that you will not do it at the right time. You will go for so much research. You will go for collecting so many brochures. You will go for doing whatever you are doing. But I think one of the things that I want to say at this phase in this session is that whatever you do, wherever you do, take that decision sooner, right? None of those decisions are going to be perfect. Everything is going to have its pros and cons. Don't delay these decision making on what you plan to do in the next 6 months or next 12 months. Because every month you are not doing this, someone else is doing things which is pulling you back. There are people who are making notes, attending tests, clearing their doubts, they are consistently preparing. And any habit formation is something that takes time to build. And the longer you delay, there is a problem with when you have more time. You always feel you can recover, right? You'll always feel that, ye to ek din hi gaya hai, right? And before you know, you go from a comfort zone to a survival mode. And I don't know whether you experienced this last year, right? We have people who are very relaxed. You will study polity for 3 months, and then you realize that mains prelims aane wala hai, let me start early. Then neither will you be able to do justice for prelims, and because you will start thinking that if I only study for prelims, I'll not clear mains. Then in February you'll again shift to mains. Then in March you'll shift to prelims. So it becomes very haphazard, right? And you don't have the accountability when you are preparing on your own. So if you are someone who have the financial resources, and if you have the bandwidth to go for a program, go for a program, right? That's what I will advise. That's why you are here. That's why you are staying in rooms out here and you are staying away from home, eating different food which you are not happy to eat, right? You're here for a primary purpose. We always see this paradox when students come to Rajendra Nagar, right? I might be misquoted on this, right? Students spend X amount of money to survive in Rajendra Nagar and only 1/3 or 1/10 of that amount of money to access guidance when you're here, right? Somebody very nicely said that nobody thinks twice before ordering pizza for $1,000. When you have to buy a book for 500, you will think, you'll delay it, you'll overthink, you'll think, should I need it, will I read it? But that coffee was $400 and that pizza was $1,000. I'm not saying for everyone, but I'm just saying in general, right? So it's a very strong paradox that we delay things and we assume that okay, I can do it on myself, right? You can always think something like that. But again, I'm not saying that people who are clearing are all from programs or from institutions. But if you're someone who needs that kind of a guidance, start for that sooner, right? Now, another problem that some of you, I think essay is another thing that I wanted to talk about. You cannot learn to write good essays between prelims and mains, period. I'm 100% clear on this. There are only 4 or 5 people in the country who have scored above 130, 140 this year. It's a very difficult paper to score, and it is people who know how to write an essay who are scoring, and not people who are writing extended GS answers. Your knowledge is being tested in optional and GS. Your personality is being tested in essay. I'm someone who has been saying this, that essay is a paper that is there in all major company recruitment, right? You go to a big company, they'll make you write an essay. If you want to get into an Ivy League college, they'll make you write an essay. You can bluff a 10 marker on gender, not an essay. You can bluff a 10 marker on class or caste or anything. In an essay, you will show who you are. Now, what is happening wrong with respect to essay nowadays is that people are filling a page with 4 examples of for a particular essay and not articulating and not thinking around that particular idea. You're filling an essay with 30 ideas in one paragraph each. It's better to write 10 ideas in one page, one side each, than 30 ideas in paragraph each. People are writing extended GS answers in essays, right? You have made it mechanical. I have this term, an engineer's essay, right? An engineer's essay is a mechanical essay which is pastel, pellets, socially, politically, economically. It is not working. The best way to write better essay is to read better content. Read long form content. This is where your Sunday review comes into use. This is where your long articles from New Yorker, reading non-fiction, reading good editorials come into use. Whenever you see a good sentence, make a note of it. Whenever you see a good quote, make a note of it. Writing good essays will require reading good content. This is it. And it will not happen overnight. I know 2 people who scored very well in essay, and one guy has a hobby of writing poetry. Right, and you're not going to write poetry when, between June and August if you don't have that habit of writing poetry. So develop that ability to identify good content. Read a few toppers essays. I think I'll start with that. When we share this mark sheet, you will find people who have scored well in essays. Identify their copies from the internet and read that. Print it and read that. And then you will realize that I have to get 450 in GS. Right, because you know that you can't do that kind of writing, right? Some things that when you see someone play an instrument, you are like, even if my life was at stake, I can't do that, right? So you need to identify your strengths, your weaknesses early. If you feel that you need to score well in a particular subject because your optional does not score beyond a certain threshold, you cannot afford to get below a certain range even in essay, right? So start reading, start writing. Essay is a paper which fortunately will not have the handwriting problem, right? Because you are writing lesser in a longer duration. But you will always have a problem of flow. You will have a problem of lack of novelty. Creative writing is working. People who are, I don't know if anyone remember last year's rank one's essay became viral. There was this introduction where he had written about Oppenheimer, right? So that was creative writing, and the general public who does not know the examination started criticizing that kis essay ko marks de raha hai, right? So it's the creative writing which is working. So essay is something that you have to do for this particular purpose, right? Now, I think another major problem that you will face is distraction, right? When you have more time, you'll feel jealous of your neighbors. You'll just feel jealous of your classmates who are doing good job in some company, in some country. And when you clear, they'll be like, see, he or she did a good decision. They were always meant to succeed. But when you have more time, you have a higher tendency to overthink. You have a higher tendency to compare yourself. You have a higher tendency to be abused by your parents and your relatives and friends, right? What are you doing with your life? You'll start having existential doubts. What am I doing with my life, right? Why am I doing this to myself, right? So I think one way to handle a long amount of time is to keep yourself super busy. Don't give yourself that time to think. I think that's one strategy that I'll advise. You pack your day so much that you just want to go back and sleep. I think during the mains phase, we tell people who are appearing for mains to write 3 papers a day. Right? That's 9 hours of writing. I had a student who came and said that that was a very good advice. I slept really well after that. When you sit and write for 9 hours, that's a talent, right? Sitting and writing for 9 hours is a talent. So what I think I would advise is that you need you need to understand that when there is too much time, time feels infinite. You feel distracted, and distractions are majorly classified into academic distractions and non-academic distractions, right? Non-academic distractions are your family, your friends, your social media channels, your peer group, non-academic. Academic distractions are all the Telegram channels, all the YouTube channels, all the PDFs that you can get, and you are walking in a minefield of distraction. The smartest people in the world are working on how to get you stuck on a screen. They're not working on making flying cars, right? They are looking at how to get you to like, share, and subscribe to channels, right? So it's not a coincidence that you realize that you have been scrolling for 1.5, 2 hours, and then you ask yourself, what did I do, right? Because you're being given content in what do you call in packet size, which makes you keep scrolling. If you like interior design, you get interior design videos. You get like football, you like dialogues, you like XYZ things. You keep getting those things, right? We had a very interesting experience today, right? We sent a reminder message to 1,000 people on WhatsApp, right? And 150, 200 people it did not deliver because they don't have WhatsApp on their phone. So I'm assuming that those are people who don't have smartphones or they are using Telegram. That's the two possible scenario. Increasingly, there is a trend among serious aspirants to transition from smartphones to keypad phones, right? It's I'm sure you'll see those kind of YouTube videos. This topper did not use phone for 2 years, right? I had a student this year who got a very good rank under 25, right? And he came and said that I used to pick up my phone only while I have meals. Because when you pick up a phone with a particular intention, the end of that picking up does not end with that intention, right? Because you start with maybe watching a video on YouTube for a particular content, but then you see that okay, there's a video on Hormuz Strait, or there is a video on whose missiles are better, Iran or Israel, right? Or we all get the same recommendations. I'm sure you are getting the same recommendations that I get, right? So we always keep consuming content which is empowering our preparation, but which is not necessarily empowering our preparation. There is no alternative to old school sitting down and writing and reading from books. I think digital technology has made you. I think I don't know. Nowadays, the thing is that everything you read, you have to ask yourself: is this real or fake? If 5 years ago you read Trump's what you call tweets, you will always say that this is definitely fake, right? You can't believe many of these things which is being written. So I think recently I'm not sure whether this is real. There was a study on the brains of people who are addicted to generative AI, how it's affecting their cognitive health, right? So this is another problem, generative AI, right? It's so easy to generate content. You ask, and it makes up a lot of content on its own. Recently, I had a very interesting experience. After prelims, we wanted to type the question paper as fast as we can. So we took photos of the question paper and we converted image into text. ChatGPT made few questions, merged a few options, right? And when the actual text came, it looked so similar, but it was not the same question paper, right? So I think it has its own limitation, and one primary problem with generative AI is that it generates too much content, right? Any question you ask, you develop a lot of content and it becomes less utility. Rather than depending upon generative AI, you have to become generative AI. We have a student this year who said this, I think rank 78, Abhishek Singh is from the AIM program. Right? He said this, and he said that I wrote so much answers that even if you wake me up at 12 o'clock in the night, I can write an answer on anything. I have become generative AI. I am the generative AI, right? I can generate content on anything. This is your goal in the next 12 months. You should be able to write on anything concisely, value added, differentiated answers. And if you do that, and if you get an ability to write a mains, your chances of getting a rank is very high, right? You always overestimate the number of people who are very well prepared for mains. If you know 100 people who are writing mains, only 10 or 15 of them are well prepared for mains. 60, 70 of them are not prepared for mains. And you don't want to be in that position next year. Don't go at prelims with a vengeance. Try to clear prelims and then mains, right? Other than things, what else? You should basically see. Basically, you have three routes: self-study, something which is something that you can do on your own without having any financial investment. You can do it on your own. Second option is to prepare with some kind of test series where you have a weekly target. We have a test series which has 2 weeks in the tests in the middle of the week. One, there is a conceptual test based on the syllabus at the end of the week, and then there is a PYQ based test based on the syllabus at the end of the week. It gets over in end of November. This is marketing. This is the course selling part, right? So I want to differentiate this part, right? So that is an MTS program. Then we have an AIM program. Some of you have heard of it. It's popular now, right? But don't join because it's popular, because it's difficult, right? We always dissuade people first when they come for counseling, and then only we tell about the good things. The first thing that we tell is all the bad things about the program, right? So it's rigorous, and that's a bad thing, right? Because I always compare AIM with my gym membership, right? I have joined so many gyms. The last gym I joined, I went one day. I recently called the trainer and asked, can I get a refund? First I asked for a refund, then I asked for a migration to the next year. He said no to both, right? So that doesn't work. So you only go for a program like AIM because it is rigorous, only if you can maintain that kind of a discipline. But somehow if you can pull yourself to do it, I think it has a very high tendency to transform you, not because of next IAS or because of AIM program. Because anyone who sits and studies for 6 hours, makes notes for 20 pages a day will definitely transform. We have just built a structure around it and given you a target. The third program is a CAVA program, Dipin Sir's current affairs classes. As a pioneer in current affairs, he goes for a thematic approach. He has a 3-phased current affairs preparation for prelims, mains, interview. It starts on July 1st, right, where he will start with mains oriented approach. Then in January, he'll go for prelims oriented approach. And then again in June, mains oriented approach. This is what he does. And I think what we have done with the program is that we have integrated a lot of answer writing. There is live answer writing in class. There is a graded assessment test. There is a very interesting test name, randomness readiness test, RRT, right? It's basically the themes that Sir wants to cover but don't have the time to cover in the class, which is covered through tests. There are flashcards, there are PYQ workbooks, there are a lot of things, right? So if you're looking for something like that, you can go for that, right? Other than this, what else? So I hope you don't have to sit in a class like this next year this time, right? Next year this time you're writing mains, right? And not listening to someone telling you how to prepare for the next year 2027, right? And any doubts I can take. New batch of AIM, it looks like I planted him, like, to ask this question so that I can tell more about the program, right? New batch of AIM is on 21st of July. But if you're looking at joining, do it sooner, because in 3 weeks, there'll be so much covered, right? CAVA starts on 1st of July. MTS is going on. So if that's something that you're looking for, you can go ahead, right? If anybody wants to have some personal doubts or any one-to-one conversation, you can have this after the session. AIM does not include optional, right? It includes everything other than optional, right? That's what I'm saying. See, you have your foundation notes. You have your currently in foundation, you go with the foundation. I think that's one thing that I'll say, because you can't differentiate this from the next year. You'll have to finish those concepts, right? Right. Right. No, I said you have to make 3 types of notes. Since you're sitting here, I'm assuming you already have your running notes. So you have to make value addition notes, thematic notes, and embellishment notes. I'm expecting you to do this in the next 6 months, not tomorrow. It's spread across the duration. You are allocating a certain amount of time every day for it. It's a routine, and it will happen over that period of time. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time. You can do it while doing foundation also, because it's 2 classes a week, right? It's 2.5 hours, 2 classes, and it's available in online mode also, right? AIM is a workbook based thing. We basically give you workbooks like this, where you are expected to write assignments on a daily basis, and it's more of a writing activity oriented program. It's not a class based program. Every question will have a video explanation. Every question will have a approach. It will have a, what do you call, solution. All those things will be available. It will not be evaluated because this is open book. We intend that this will become your geography notes. This is the purpose, right? Okay. Thank you everyone.